Well, it's 12 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time, so we're going to go ahead and get this webinar started. We have about an hour and a half today to go over cultural diversity considerations when supporting job seekers and employees with disabilities. So thank you for joining us today. This is a webinar sponsored by the Center for Persons with Disabilities and the Department of Special Education Rehabilitation Counseling. So we are offering CRCs. You need to attend the entire webinar to receive those CRCs, and you will receive an email shortly after this webinar with the CRCs attached to the email. You'll also get an evaluation, a quick evaluation. If you could just take a couple minutes and fill out that evaluation, that would be greatly appreciated, just so we know, how we're doing, number one, and also so we can get a sense of what kind of webinars we need to put together in the future. We hope to continue to offer these CRCs throughout the year, so we will, your feedback is greatly appreciated. Just a couple other housekeeping issues. If you could just mute your mics while we're on, just so we don't get some strange feedback, and it's always a bit disruptive. So there's a couple mics on. Just go ahead and please make sure they're muted as we're talking, and we'll go from there. You will be able to use the chat box for questions. Eduardo, Dr. Ortiz is going to spend most of the time presenting today. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then I'll monitor the text box if you have specific questions for Dr. Ortiz, and we'll go from there. My name is Tim Reese, and if you don't know who I am, I'm here at the Center for Persons with Disabilities. I'm the Director of Research and Training here, and I've been at the center for about almost prior to that, I was over in the Department of Special Education and Rehabilitation Counseling. Dr. Ortiz, do you want to spend a second and introduce yourself, and then we will get this presentation.
Two different. Do you want me to mute my thing? Okay. Did we want to hook up these speakers?
Yeah.
All right, Eduardo?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. My name is Eduardo Ortiz, and as you can hear, I work here at the Center for Persons with Disabilities. I came here at the beginning of 2000. I was planning to stay for a few years doing graduate school, but I am still here. I got my PhD in sociology with emphasis in social demography, but also I have a law degree back from my country. Very happy to be here and very happy to share my learnings and my lessons during the past years that I've been living here. I think a lot of to share, especially during those times.
Thanks, Dr. Ortiz. So we're really excited to have this presentation today. And this presentation has really come about just in conversations that we've been having throughout the year here at the CPD, but also just in terms of the general political climate. I think it's really important to have these discussions about cultural diversity and how perhaps we can start thinking about working with people who are culturally diverse in different ways and supporting that cultural diversity, and also recognizing our own bias and when we're supporting people with disabilities. So Eduardo, can you go to the next slide? So what we plan to cover today is I'm going to do just a quick introduction about the importance of employment, just spending a little bit of time really reinforcing why employment is so important for people, not just people with disabilities, but all people. And I'll quickly review some of the things that, if you know me and have taken some of my classes, that might be old hat, but I think it's always important to talk about the importance of employment. And then Eduardo is going to talk about some social demographics, some trends and some changes in terms of the demographic makeup of our country, because I think it's a really important thing to think about, because we are changing. And if we don't respond to these changes, then we're going to be behind the game. So Eduardo is going to spend some time talking about what that looks like. And then we're going to talk about, Eduardo is going to talk about cultural factors for diverse workers, and then move into some approaches and solutions, spending some time talking about cultural humility, talking about the cultural and linguistically appropriate services, and other practices and resources that hopefully will benefit you as a VRC or as a rehabilitation professional. And I think it's really important that we review each one of these elements and really reflect on how we are working with people who are culturally diverse. Eduardo, do you want to go to the next slide, please? So just in regard to employment, you know, we all know the importance of employment and how it impacts people's life across the board, disability or not. When we're thinking about employment and thinking about the importance of employment, we know that that employment improves the quality of life. So there's certainly a interrelationship between employment and quality of life measures in a number of areas. First and foremost, health. People who work are more healthy. People who work are more productive across the board, not only in working environments, but also in home and community environments. You access your community, you engage in your community. Safety, emotional well-being. Work is directly correlated to a person's emotional well-being. Material well-being. So if you're working, you have the money to go and do things that you can't if you're not working. And also it gives us a really a good sense of a place in our community. So when people aren't working, their quality of life diminishes. When people work, quality of life increases. We also know that work is directly related to self-esteem, right? So people who work have better self-esteem. In fact, there's been data and research out there, especially when we're talking about how people self-report disability. So when we're thinking about the American Community Survey, which is the annual supplement to the US Census that looks at certain demographic variables, including disability, if a person is working, they're less likely to report a disability than those who aren't working. So when you work, your self-esteem certainly improves. People who work have better access to healthcare and education. So, you know, when you're working, and that goes back to that quality of life indicator, when you are working, you typically have that access to healthcare. You typically have better access to education. You know, we know for a fact that when people with disabilities are more likely to live in poverty. I think the rate that I checked this morning was about 26% of people with disabilities live in poverty, and work hopefully gets us out of that threshold and gets us, helps an individual have better access to that healthcare, have better access to education, so we can move out of those poverty thresholds. Work helps us build social connections. I know, and this is kind of ironic given the world that we've been in for the past year, where we've all maybe not had as many social connections, and they've been via Zoom or we've all been relatively isolated. And now that we're seeing some sense of coming back to the new normal, it's very nice to have those social connections at work. It's nice to talk to somebody in the office. It's good to see people and go engage with people at work. And that's where most of our most of our relationships happen, is in these working environments. So work for people is critical to build those social connections. And finally, work reduces isolation. You know, people who don't work are typically more isolated than people that do. And this becomes even more pervasive when we're talking about people with more significant disabilities, who we tend to segregate and cluster more than people who have a high incidence disability. So work is important for a number of these reasons, right? And we have to consider these as we're supporting people with disabilities and supporting people with disabilities who are also culturally diverse. So Eduardo, can you go to the next slide, please? So these are some data that I pulled up just to kind of illustrate what the current situation is in terms of employment. So this is from the American Community Survey that I referenced earlier. And the American Community Survey, once again, is a supplement to the census, and it collects data on a yearly basis on specific demographic variables and employment outcomes and so on and so forth for people. And this is the latest data. It's 2018 data that shows what's happening in terms of work. So we know, all of you know, that employment outcomes for people with disabilities remain pretty dismal, and they have remained dismal for for as long as we've been collecting data, right? Things haven't really shifted in terms of employment outcomes for people with disabilities in years. We're seeing maybe a little gradual uptick the past couple years, but it's only a percentage or two for people with disabilities. And this ACS data is aggregate data for all different types of all disability types. So this is aggregate data that's clumped together. When you start looking at data for specific disability populations, especially when we're thinking about people with intellectual developmental disabilities, people with autism, so on and so forth, we start to see these data plummet even more. So we're talking down in the teens for employment rates for people with disabilities. And most employment for people with disabilities is part-time work. It's not full-time work. So going back to what I was talking about earlier, when we're talking about those quality of life indicators, you know, we want to move people up to work as many hours as they can possibly work in order to start having that shift occur. So when you start looking at these data and these data in relationship to race and cultural diversity, it compounds the issue. So people with disabilities from ethnic and diverse backgrounds have even poorer employment rates than people with disabilities who are white. So these data really reflect what's going on across the board. So when the idea of cultural diversity is critically important to the conversation about how we're going to improve employment outcomes for people and people with disabilities. Eduardo, can you go to the next slide, please? So as Eduardo and I were kind of talking about this presentation and putting it together and thinking about what we wanted to get at, some of our conversations really centered around this idea of systems and the way we set up systems and how systems respond to different populations and different cultures. Our systems right now, the way we have kind of set our system up, is from a Eurocentric framework, which really is designed to teach independence, right? So our school systems are designed to teach independence. Our government systems and our government support systems are designed to teach independence. From a family systems, we're all, you know, designed to teach this relative independence, right? We get people through our systems and then they go off and, you know, from a Eurocentric standpoint, individuals go off and work independently, have their own independent households, and basically kind of move away from, you know, the family system, if you will. So one of the things that Eduardo and I were talking about is from a culturally diverse perspective, some cultures are more collaborative in nature than others, right? And we have to really consider that as we're looking at this cultural diversity piece, right? And it's really important to think of this independence versus interdependence, right? Eurocentric systems are often independent systems. Culturally diverse populations, some cultural, and Eduardo, I'm sure will speak to this later on in our presentation, work off of more of an interdependent system, where people are more likely to value these relationships and adjust their behaviors to accommodate other individuals, right? So this interdependent relationship is really important. And yet we often go in and provide services and supports from a school systems approach or a government systems approach with this mindset of independence. And so sometimes these counteract or butt heads when we're trying to develop these culturally responsive services and systems. Eduardo, can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, this is you. So yeah, so what's going to happen for the remaining part of this session is Dr. Ortiz is going to spend some time really addressing these cultural diversity considerations when supporting job seekers with disabilities. And he's going to review some data related to how our demographics are changing and also ways that you as professionals, whether you're a VRC or working in a community rehabilitation for a community rehabilitation provider, how you can be more culturally responsive to job seekers and employees with disabilities. So Eduardo, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Diversity, I think it is wonderful. Part of that is that we have different styles. So you probably, for the rest of this webinar, I'm gonna keep a slower pace than Tim, uh, and but that is part of the diversity piece. And every time that we talk about this topic, many personal experience come to my mind that is going to be integrated through this presentation, because I have seen, I have feeling, and that is sometimes an important difference beyond the cognitive abstract of the presentation, is also to share what happened in a personal base. So just for example, when Tim was talking about independence versus more collaborative approaches, it came to my mind when my first lesson that I got here, when I was writing my dissertations. My major professor made me change all the places where I put we to change to the and put it I, and it was more than 100 places. So, you know, just to give you an example of how we approach different, I usually use we because it is how I grew up, how I was trained. And to put it in my, the word I, it was kind of a tough lesson, but I keep learning among us. I keep living here. When I came here also, I came with my child who was very young at that time. So I've been through very different systems and structures here, and I will share as long as we present this webinar. Well, let's start. I want to start with this picture because I think it gives us an important idea, because equality is not the same as equity. Adjustments need to be done for everyone so they can have access to enjoy the game all together. Equality simply means everyone treated the same way, but regardless of need of any individual difference. And as we know, because we are working in the field of disabilities, sometimes we don't have the same resources. So equity is an important concept that we need to approach, because we need to provide what they need, what the individual needs to succeed. And sometimes it means accommodations and changes that are important, but it can be done to achieve equity. I think is part of our work. And the point is that in many cases, especially working with a vulnerable and underserved population, those disadvantages are prevalent in those groups. And we need to understand and maximize the resources that is available and we can count on. So I think it is a good picture to start with. Let's start with the elements of culture. As you can see here from this figure, there are many elements of cultures that can be analyzed, related with race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geography, education, religion, health, beliefs, country of origin, gender, sexual orientation, ability, sex, age, so many things. But because some of those are important during the current times, we are going to focus in specific elements of culture. By the way, this number of elements of culture is not complete. So many more can be added related with what we like to do, sports that we practice, hobbies that we do, principles that we have, social norms, behavior, so many more things that we can add. But because of we are going to focus on this webinar on especially on race and ethnicity, but also I want to touch important elements of culture that are critical for the coming future for this nation. And maybe because it is the bias that I have as a demographer, that I can see how it's going to be the population projection in the coming years. So we are going to talk a little bit about age, about also the geography, rural and urban. As we know, there are important differences that need to be addressed, and we need to know who are we going to work with? Who is the audience that we need to approach? Who is the target? And we need to understand the best that we can. Also, there are changes in family structure that I would like just to give you a little bit of what is happening, because that is going to influence in the ways how we interact in the abilities, of course, because we are in the field of disabilities. Why cultural factors are important for employment outcomes? I always keep asking this question because it's a critical one. Why? Why is important? I'm going to give you some of the answers that I came up, but always I'm reflecting and always I am adding things. But let's see it from the demographic perspective. The nation, the population is changing. What happens, what was 50 years ago is very different of what is happening now. Demographics are changing based on where the people are coming from, based on where they are living, based on the family, family structures and the dynamic of the societies and the community. It will help us. It will help us as professionals to look what are the services that are going to be needed, because we need to, again, we need to understand the population that we are going to work with. And demographics is giving that information, and I think it is critical. What is the people that we are going to work with? Where they are located? What do they need? How we can improve, in this case, employment outcomes, how we can help them to be more effective. As Tim was saying at the beginning, the benefits of employment is huge in the life, and not only for the individual, but also for the, that is the human capital that is going to influence in everything that's around that individual. It is important because it's going to improve and expand the access to services. If we understand better the population that we are going to work with, of course, it is going to improve the participation of that population. They are going to know better how to access what is available, where it is, and how they can use it. It's going to improve the quality of services. Of course, if we know how to interact better with the population, the quality is going to be better. The satisfaction level is going to be much better because we are more effective how we are interacting with them, how we are approaching them, how they are using us to accomplish what they want to. It's going to be a positive business outcome. And that is an important one that I want to emphasize, because if we have a higher number of customers, of clients, it is going to be good for us as from the business perspective. Yes, it is going to help us to increase the number of people who is using the services that we want to provide. But also, I want you to also to look from the other perspective, especially for employers. Especially before COVID, there were some literature that were emphasizing the positive outcomes of having a more diverse workforce. So having a more diverse workforce, it means more employees from different backgrounds were giving better productivity outcomes. So helping diversity to be part of the workforce is not only helping to the individuals, it's also helping to the companies, it's also helping to the business, it's also helping to the industry, because diversity is a strength, it's an asset. We need to know how to maximize that asset. We need to know how to better with that asset. And based on that, we need to understand better that population. It also is going to help to reduce health and social inequities. yes, if we provide better services, of course, it's going to decrease the current health disparities that we see currently, and those has been very evident, especially with these pandemic times that we are living, where the impact was higher in the most vulnerable populations here in the US. Just to give you an example, the cost benefit, the cost of inequalities is huge. There is a study that between 2003 and 2006, they estimate that the cost of health disparities, just health disparities, that is related to other outcomes, including employment. Just because of health disparities, approach $1.3 trillion, not billion, $1 trillion. It's about over 300 billions per year. And that is based on an analysis of credible literature and research done. So it is huge, the cost benefit approach. If we can help to reduce that, the society at whole has gainings. Also, from the legislation of the law, there are many policies and mandates that we need to follow. Just to give you an example, we need to provide language access for every organization that receives federal funding. So the law is telling us we need to do something related with the diversity population. Also, it's going to reduce potential litigations that, as we are going to see later on with an example, just one word that was wrong translated, it costs dozens of millions of dollars that in this case, a hospital had to pay. So it also helped to reduce potential litigation. So let's start reviewing some demographic information that we need to. It's going to help us to understand better what is happening now. Let's look here at this table that I prepared for you. At this time, 2019, actually, the white alone population represents 60% of the total population. White alone, non-Hispanic Latinos. So 60% is an important percentage, but that is decreasing in the future. This population also is very old, as we are going to see on average. 60%. But let's see in the other side, the multicultural population. They are increasing in percentages. Every time that I look at the census data, at least some numbers are changing for this group. The Hispanic Latino represent 18.5%. Nationwide, no. The Asian population, almost 6%, and the Black or African American represent 13.4%. So something that I want to share with you also is that sometimes we look at the numbers, in this case percentage, and that is abstract. They represent a lot of millions of people. As we see the number of people, the multicultural population here in the US, including Hispanic, Latino, and other minority groups, they are more than 130 million individuals. 130 millions of people. It is a lot of people that we are going to have the opportunity to work with. In this case, we can see also how it has increased dramatically in the last 15 years. And because I am a Hispanic Latino person, I always bring this example because give me the opportunity to show what is happening now. In the past 50 years, it went from 9.6 million individuals to 60.6 million. Huge, 6 times increase in 50 years. It is quite a bit of change. What does it mean? It is just a fact. The fact is that we have a large percentage of a Hispanic Latino population that we are going to work with now and in the future even more. Because as we can see with the next slide, population is not equally distributed among ages. What is happening, as you can see from this graphic, I think is very important graphic, that is not equally distributed among all the ages, the population of different groups. If we can see the Y population, by the way, the terminology that I am using is the terminology that is used by the census. So the Y population is very steady among the generations, from Generation Z, Millennials, Generation X, Boomers, and the oldest population is kind of steady, you know, in the 20s percentage. But if you look at the other minority groups, it is different. Look at the Hispanic Latino. Generation Z, it means people who are 0 to 21 years old. They represent 38% of the total population of Hispanic Latino. What does it mean? That we have a larger number of young Hispanic Latinos here in the US. That is very important because they are the people that they are going to be in the working ages. They are the people who need to acquire as much education or human capital to put it at work. They are the ones who are going to pay our Social Security. So the best we can help them, the best outcomes that is going to help us in the long run. Look at the same thing with the other multicultural populations, like the Asian population, the Black population, the Native American population. We have a larger percentage at younger ages. What is happening nationwide, it doesn't happen in the same way everywhere geographically. It doesn't. As we can see here, just some states that are close to Utah, the regional states, we have higher percentage of some groups in some states, like in Montana, 6.7% of Native American population, or North Dakota, 5.6%, when US, the national percentage of Native American population is just 1.3%. But they don't have larger percentage of other minority groups like Hispanic, Latino, or Asian. But what is happening at other states like Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, they have a larger percentage of Hispanic, Latino population. So geographically, it doesn't mean that all the people is equally distributed. And it also happened at the city levels. Here in Logan, we are here at Utah State University in Logan. We can see, for example, that just the west side of the city is different compared with the east side. And the same happens in Salt Lake. The east side with the west side is different. They have different levels of concentration of minority groups. So, you know, it's not equally distributed among all the places. Here is a projection of what is happening in the next 40 years. It means that in the future, the majority of the population is coming from multicultural minority groups. Something that I just want to highlight, that we don't need to wait until 2060 to see that. Right now, actually, I think 2012 was, from the demographic change, a historical year, because the majority of newborn babies were coming from minority groups. It was an important point in history. And now the majority of young population, the majority of children under 18 years old are coming from minority groups, multicultural minority groups. So we don't need to wait until 2060 to see those numbers. Right now, especially to the professionals who are working with young population, you can see those those trends. You are having, you see more and more at the schools, at the health providers places that is coming in larger numbers, individuals from minority groups. That's why I think it is an important data also that I would like to share is the median age, because it emphasized the point that I was making before. Nationwide, the median age is 44 years for the white population. But for the minority, US minority population, the median age is 31 years. Huge difference, especially if we can extrapolate this concept to employment outcomes. The younger populations is the workforce that is going to be the engine of the nation. So we need to pay particular attention to those ages and those where these people are part of what groups. We can see graphically what I was talking about, that the youngest and oldest populations are not equally distributed. If you can see, the darkest the color, the oldest the population in those counties. It's interesting if we look at our states like Utah. Idaho is interesting. If you see the north of Idaho is a kind of dark color, it means the older population living there. But most part of this region are young population living here, but it is not the same what is happening in other parts of the United States. This is another demographic piece that I think it is important, where the people are living. 100 years ago, the majority of the population were living in rural areas, but now is the opposite. Now the majority of the population are living in urban areas. But still we have a large percentage of frontier or rural counties, especially in this area of the central west area of the United States, as you can see. And why I point out this information, because these services related to employment are very different in rural areas compared with urban areas. So we need to know where people are living and how we can provide services in the best way in different parts. Providing services in the rural area is going to be more challenging because many services are not available in the transportation is an example. If you want to go from your house to many of the places providing services, you need to drive. And what happens if you don't have transportation? Many limitations are happening related with that. So,
Eduardo?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a question for you about the age discrepancies. How much does life expectancy for those groups play into the percentages?
That is an important question that also is related to the, you need to intersect where do they live? And that is important. When I was looking life expectancy in some places here within Utah, for example, we are talking about important number of years of difference related with life expectancy. So I think it's the combination of factors. Where do you live? Just to give you an example, Cache Valley with Weaver County. You see the number, the life expectancy, it is different. So the answer, a good answer would be if you look at specific places, because it comes to other factors. And we are going to see later on about social determinants of health. We are going to look factors related with where the people live, work, play, learn, and work. So, yeah. Also, we are going to have at the end additional time to expand some of this discussion And I think some of the answers are going to be given in this context, because I think it's important to have a holistic approach. Where we are at here, we can see also these graphics related with disability across America. And look, this is an interesting factor related with where they are at. If you see the states that have the younger population, the colors are not as dark as in other places. What does it mean? That probably states with younger population have lower numbers of disability rates. But if you see the dark numbers, you see that the disability rates in other places are some of those states that have older populations in there. So age is another factor that is playing in the interpretation of those graphics. And that is just one slide that I want to show related with the family structures, how it is changing. One-parent families, it has increased from the past years, and represent an important percentage of the total number of families. Look at that, at the numbers, 26% in, I think it's 2014. And the trend continued, but even though it was becoming more steady. On the other side, two-parent families are decreasing. Why that's important? Of course, it is important if we are looking at young children and how they are getting prepared for employment outcomes. It's different having a two-parent family compared with one-parent family. And those are the diverse considerations that we need to take into account when we are preparing to develop those resources and tools for them, and services as well. And this is another one that I just did one slide related with LGBTQ demographics. Look at the difference among different generations. The younger generations are increasing in the number of identifying as LGBTQ by their cohort. So if you look at the older generations, Generation X, baby boomers, or the traditionals, the numbers are steady, but it's not the same for the younger generations. It is increasing. Another factor to consider related with diversity. And of course, socioeconomic factors is always plays a role, but it is intersected with these other elements of culture, including race and ethnicity that we have been talking about. As you can see from there, minorities are the ones who have lower incomes for the many years in the past. And after showing some of the demographics, I would like you to just to make a pause of 5-10 seconds and think, what are you seeing in your location? What are some of those changing demographics that are happening wherever you are at, in your city, in your community, in your own organization that you are providing services? Because of time, we are going to come back to some of this information that you are providing now to expand the discussion at the end. And also think about it, how your agencies and organizations are responding to those changing demographics. Every place is different. Every geography is unique. But we have different challenges. And I don't think there is just one universal prescription for everybody. But we can have some guidelines, some frameworks that can help us. And that is what we are going to try to address later. But please, take a few seconds of your time and share with us what are some of those demographic changes that you are observing and you are witnessing from your own places. Okay, let's go to the next part that I think it is important for this discussion. The social determinants of health. As we can see here, health and healthcare is not the only important factor to consider when we are talking about health. We need to look at where the people live, where the people play, where they learn, where they work, because it is gonna influence in our life and outcomes. It is gonna influence in our success stories. When we are talking about economic stability, we are talking about employment. We are talking about food security, housing instability, poverty. That is important, especially during those times. And we can see that it impacts different to different people. When we are talking about education, we are talking about early childhood education opportunities. We are talking about enrollment. We are talking about graduation rates. We are talking about all those indicators related with academic work. When we are talking about neighborhoods and environment, how is the level of crimes there? How is security there? How is the environmental indicators? Those things are related with quality of life. And as Tim was pointing out at the beginning, quality of life is important, and that is related with employment. It influences both ways. Just to share some examples of what is happening now. There are important differences, different outcomes between diverse groups. In this case, just comparing people with disabilities and people without disabilities from social factors, we can see important difference. It was at the beginning of this presentation that we were looking at similar trends. Victims of violent crime, also related with health behaviors and health risk, important differences related with factors related with access to services, important differences. Important difference also related to rural and urban areas. The rural counties, the people are older, poorer, more likely to be overweight or obese, sicker. Rural residents also have higher injury rates, more smoking rates, uninsurance, rates of suicide. All of those related with health is going to have some impact also on employment outcomes. Insurance, that is so important. Who is the people who are the most uninsurance? Minority groups. So there is an important intersectionality between some of the race and ethnicity with some, in this case, with some socio-demographic factors. It is an example of, you know, how impact differently in these pandemic times. The percentage of change in numbers employed, who were the most impacted? You can see from there, it came from minority groups in both, in frontline workers as well as in frontline workers. They were the most impacted. How are we time? Okay. This is a summary. People of color were subject of overall increased risk of job loss during the initial phase of COVID-19, likely as a product of a structural and interpersonal racism. So there were important impacts. Here is an example that I want to share that has been systematic, related with health disparities. It was an analysis of the 15 years in Utah. It was prepared for the Office of Health Disparities, that is part of the Utah Department of Health. In the case of Native American population, 27 indicators analyzed. 26 indicators show health disparities. So just one indicator was not showing health disparities. For 15 years, it's not for 1 year or two, it's for 15 years. So it has been persistent. Health is important to achieve some of the outcomes related with work. The same for Hispanic Latino. It was not that at the extreme as Native American population, but you can see there, it's a very large percentage. 28 indicators out of 43 indicators were showing health disparities during 15 years. And other groups like refugee population, also they experience important health disparities and health problems. So now I would like to you think about what can we do to improve diversity employment outcomes. Just after looking at the demographic changes, as well as to the social determinants of health differences among groups, what can we do? Please write in the chat, and we will come back for discussion. I want to cover some of the materials that I prepared for you, so the discussion is going to be more contextual and holistic. I think that that approach is important at this point. Yes.
There's another question coming in about the health indicators that you were just mentioning.
Yes.
Of the 27 indicators, which one showed no disparity?
I do have the table. I don't know if it's at the end, but in the meantime, in the post time, I will look at it. But that is in the report prepared for the Office of Health Disparities. That it is actually that office of the Utah Department of Health. They have a lot of information, great information. That is one of my resources to look at some of those current trends and updates related with health. So I'll get back to that indicator. So please think about what can we do, and we'll discuss later. So for this presentation, I think part of this discussion is related with, okay, why is that? Why is that? And we are going to cover about white privilege, microaggressions, and bias in everyday life. As I said at the beginning, I'm gonna share some personal, I have a long list that when I was, every time that I reviewing this is coming and updating some of personal situations that happened to me. So you are going to know a little bit more about me, I think, at the end of this presentation. That's what I want. Okay, what is white privilege? White privilege is an invisible package of an asset that we can count on cashing in each day. It was developed by Peggy McIntosh, I think in the late 80s. And they were saying that, yeah, white privilege is something that sometimes we take it for granted. That is not the case for people of color, people of diverse ethnic or race group. She also mentioned about other type of diversity, but in this case, we were just looking at the race ethnicity piece. White privilege has nothing to do with whether or not we are good people. Just privilege are part of it. And we are going to see some examples of white privilege. Just to think about. If people taking me more seriously when I speak than they would, a person of color saying the same things in the same way, they am benefiting from white privilege. I can play for a day of work without once having to think that my skin color is going to be a factor in how I am treated or what I might encounter. If I should get pulled over by the police, there is a strong possibility that the police officer will be of my race, and as a result, don't make assumptions about me. Here there are 3 examples that I put it that I think might help us to reflect about this concept of white privilege, that sometimes we take it for granted when we don't, it didn't affect or doesn't impact on the individual. But it has an impact when the person is from a different race or ethnic group. Just give you one example that happened to me. I have a motorcycle. When I go with my motorcycle with a helmet that is complete cover, I have much more greetings than when I go with a helmet that is open. It is evident, because when I am with the helmet, you know, we have some codes of greetings when we cross by in motorcycles. But when they can see me, that greeting is not the same. I notice, I feel it. Some of those changes related with white privilege are structural. So it is part of where we, you know, of some of the society structure related with security, related with the schools, related with how the system work. And you notice when it is different treatment compared with other. Here we have here examples that we can see with data. You know, when whites constitute 90% of those who use illegal drugs, less than half of those are in prison on drug use charges who are white. So we have a large percentage of people who are in prison who are from different color. That discussion has been in the past few months part of our lives, and we can see some narratives, we can see some examples at the personal level, but also at the numbers level. The data is telling us, yeah, we can see. So I'm just presenting data. I'm just trying to present facts. And it impact when these situations are close to you. It goes beyond abstract comprehension of percentage or numbers, or when somebody is always telling you, you know, look what happened to my friend, or look what happened to my neighbor, look what happened to my family member. It is important if we are interacting with multicultural populations, as we are expecting based on the numbers, we are going to have more and more interactions with multicultural population. We need to get information. We need to do something. We need to listen. We need to talk. We need to create safe places for talking, safe places for interacting, safe places for working. We need to create safe places. Otherwise, we don't get that important information from the others. We need to get, if we want to get important outcomes, we need to get open. We need to know exactly what the person needs, what the person feels. Otherwise, we might lose an opportunity to be effective or maximize opportunities to help or to work with.
Eduardo, there's a great comment in the box about white privilege, but what about non-disability privilege?
That is something that we need to extrapolate this information. I think it's a great comment and a great reminder, because At this point, I may be emphasizing only race and ethnicity, but yes, and McIntosh, she said that we were covering also this part related to race, but there is other elements, elements of culture that also need to be approached, not only related with abilities, also related with age, related with gender, related with geography, where they live. But we need to, we are going to have an opportunity to extrapolate. And I think that is an important reminder, because we cannot cover everything at once. But if we have a clear idea how to react, how to interact, how to work with, we can extrapolate. And that is part of the critical thinking. We need to use what is working and extrapolate and put it in other situations. I think that is an important lesson that we need to get, because if something is working in some places, also I think can help to improve in other groups, and the other way as well. And I put it in reverse, that question. We have many lessons from the disability culture that we should apply and put it in action in the race ethnicity group. There are so many good things. Look at how much progress has been done in the disability field. How many policies, laws, actions, initiatives. And it has helped. And I think it can help more to other groups as well to follow that, to follow those strategies, to follow those ideas. So, I agree. We need to look at in a more holistic way, and that is going to help us to improve as providers of services, as well as for our nation. So because of the time, I want to cover also the other two important piece of this why. Why is that? In addition to white privilege, that is an important concept, I want to cover about microaggressions. Microaggressions have been defined as brief and common daily verbal behaviors and environmental communications, intentional or unintentional, hostile, that transmit hostile, derogatory, and negative messages to target persons because they belong to a stigmatized group that can be based on race, ethnicity, disability status, gender, socioeconomic, SES, age, etc. So, if we can see from this definition, it's brief and common. So it happens all the time. It happens, and sometimes it can be very, very small, but when it's repetitive, it can hurt. And as somebody always repeats the example that somebody gave me, microaggressions is like a mosquito bite. One mosquito bite, that's okay. We can live with that. Two mosquito bites, yeah. 3 as well. We survive, no problem. But what happens when we have 100 or 1,000 mosquito bites? That becomes ugly. You know, it's the accumulation of that, and it can be in many different ways. Let's see some example. Happens everywhere. At the park, at the store, in the clinic, in the school, at work, at social events, in the media, in the street, by phone, everywhere. Many examples, many examples. Let me share a few. When I go to the health clinic, for example, people, without asking me, they just give me the Spanish form of what I need to fill it up. They didn't ask me anything. They just give me the Spanish form. Why? And I love speaking Spanish. I think it's a great language. I love it. It's part of my roots. But why I don't like that? I don't like that for several reasons. But the main one is because many of the translations are not the most clear ones. I prefer to read in English because I understand better in English, even though it's my second language, than in the Spanish. But automatically, without asking me, they are giving me the Spanish form. And when I ask, how do you know that I want the Spanish form? And, you know, very trivial answers. They're like, oh, I am a good guesser. Oh, because I can identify people. You see, there is a microaggression. There is something that we are going to talk later that is about implicit bias. At the store, it can be very, very simple one, or it can be also be very, very strong, close to an insult. Once, what happened to me, for example, at the store, I was finishing my PhD here at USU, and I was at the store and I was having a nice chat with somebody there. And we were talking about, you know, some current topics there. And at the end of the conversation, the person said, oh, you seem very smart. You should finish your GED. You are capable of it. You know, what is in their mind? For me, I realize that people is looking at me in a very different way that I think. So it was like, okay, that is, you know, a big range of what can happen with microaggressions. We think that very simple things are not impacting, that need to be very strong to impacting the other person, and that is not true. So in the same store all the time, if you see the interaction between the clerk with a white person and with a person from a minority group, the changes are automatic. If you look at that, if you observe, those are automatic for both sides, and that creates impact. And that is part of this microaggression, that it is continuous and is making the people react in different ways. And sometimes, or many times, not in the most effective way of the interaction, because people start not saying exactly what they feel or what they think.
Eduardo, there's another question about microaggressions and communication, and whether or not the communication can be secondhand, meaning, do microaggression communications have to be with the targeted person, or can it be with a non-targeted person, but about a targeted person?
The microaggression can be direct or indirect. Oh yeah, all the time. We can see in the media, we can hear in the radio, we can see in the TV. You know, we can hear those jokes, and it is there. You know, the microaggression is right there, and we need to understand, and that is going to be part of the approaches to solution, that we are having an imbalance during the interactions. So how it's going to be the reaction of the person who has less power, who has the control of the situation, who does not have the control of the situation. We need to be better communicators. We need to be better interactors. And we made mistakes, but at least we need to know how to approach and recognize those mistakes and fix it. It doesn't mean that it's intentional. Some might be intentional, but most of the time I don't think it's intentional. But the impact is right there. They are hurting. Remember the idea of the mosquito bite. It is there, and sometimes it can have a very strong negative impact on the person. And we are going to see later during the interactions that we have with our clients, with our customers. It happened at the school. It doesn't need to be verbal. It can be just gestures. It can be so many ways. And we are not, I think we are not interacting in an effective way at this point with multicultural population. Let's see some examples that are coming from the chapter 11 of the book that is called Microaggressive Experience. of people with disabilities. Look at this case. I spoken at 3 different schools in the past month, and the thing that I mostly start out with is that people have said, what do you like to be called? Disabled, handicapped, challenged. You see, we are missing the important part is the person. I'm like, just call me Susan. That's all I want. Or this one. And by the way, I feel guilty because I have done this. On any given day, someone will race across the parking lot and won't even be looking for help. I'll be putting my chair in my car. And can I help you? Can I help you? It is not intentional, but we are creating some microaggression. What is the best way to approach? What is the best way to interact? What is the best way to communicate? We want to be helpful, but we need to do it in an effective way. Sometimes it can be very, time is running. Okay, in a very passive way, like, you know, a joke. How many jokes we have heard? And that is impacting. This one, when we look at a person from a minority group and we say, okay, tell me about the whole race that you represent. It happens to me all the time, and you know, just the Hispanic Latino is very different. We have more than 20 different countries, and even in my small country, Ecuador, we have 4 different regions. We have the coast, the highlands, the Amazon. We have Galapagos Islands that are very different. I don't know everything about my country. I cannot talk about even my country at whole. I cannot even talk about the Hispanic Latino here. If we add another factor, the second generation of immigrants are totally different with the first generation of immigrants. That, by the way, is a big difference when we're approaching about this group. The second generation, they don't, in many places, second or third generation, they don't even speak Spanish in many cases. Sometimes it can be even very direct, the microaggression. You know, it's when we say that a person from a minority group cannot become, cannot be in that level of power because it's just coming from a different group. I need to make a 1 second pause. But because of the time, I would like to stop the examples here that I have many, and just saying that it happens all the time. It happens. There are many types of microaggressions. What is called microinsults, assaults, invalidation, many types. But again, it is not about the cognitive piece many times. We need to learn how to interact in the best way. We need to recognize. We need to be more effective. And communication is part of the cultural competency that we would like to develop. But sometimes we only see the surface of the person. We don't see much. And we need to understand that there are so much under the surface. There is so much. And we need to open. We need to make that level of water go down so we understand the people that we work with. We need to know each other better. That is going to help. Otherwise, what is happening with this implicit unconscious bias? The definition says that is a prejudice or unsupported judgment in favor of against one thing. And usually is considered unfair. It happens automatically as the brain makes quick judgment based on past experience and background and refers to attitudes and beliefs that occur outside of our conscious awareness and control. What does it mean? That everybody has bias based on where they grew up, who were they interacting with, what are all those factors, were those factors that influence in that person when they were growing. Everybody has bias. So I took a model from Matthew 2015. He wrote a book that it is called Just Medicine. And this model was specifically developed for medical providers. At that level, the unconscious bias, I think, is important for us, again, to extrapolate this situation to other situations in our work or in our everyday life. So I took this model and I applied to our case, talking about implicit bias before the service encounter. When you are having interactions with other people, you already have bias before, based on what you have read, based on who you, where did you grow up, who did you interact with, based on the statistical interpretations of that you have studied. You have bias before the encounter, before you interact with the person. But also you have bias during the encounter with the person. And not only you as a provider, but also the client, the patient, they have bias when they are interacting with you. Based on what? Based on what do you see at that time? What they dress, how they talk, how they move. You already are creating bias in your mind. But also the patient, the customer also is interacting with you, and they are making assumptions as well. How they treatment, how they approach, what did they say, what is happening during that encounter. And you know, those encounters are fast. It's 1 hour. In the case of doctors, it's 15, 20 minutes. And you already have an idea based on implicit bias. And that, I realized that so many times in both sides, as a customer as well as a provider. And I think we can realize that we can do a better job, because the unconscious bias goes even after the encounter. You know, your client come to your office, you already have a bias, you start interacting with them, additional bias, and even after the bias, after the encounter, when you need to do a diagnosis, when you need to make decisions, you are using sometimes this bias to make those decisions. And that is risky, and that is sometimes dangerous. I think that we need to know better each other. And the same with the clients. They have. In a focus group, just to give you an example, in a focus group with refugee population, I was asking, related with mental health, I was asking, after tons of effort for an organization to make them to go to the mental health services. But after that, I asked, and how is the follow-up? Oh, the person said, no, it didn't work. It doesn't apply to me. They were wrong. You know, it's how effective we can be if those situations are not effective at the end of all the efforts that we have put into. And then we come back to, we need to create this equity approach. There are some instruments that I want to share with you. First one is the national CLAS standards. The national CLAS standards imply 15 principles or items related with governance, leadership and workshop, communication, language assistance, engagement, continuous improvement, and accountability. And that can be applied not only at the organizational level, but also at the state level. As we can see in the next slide, they are tracking how we are doing There are some states that are doing better than others. By the way, this map was updated recently because they were tracking different indicators before. And I'm glad that we are making progress, not everywhere, but we are making progress related with those 15 CLAS standards, cultural, linguistic, appropriate services and standards. I think it's a good framework for providers to use, and they can look at. The other approach is a traditional one related with cultural competency. Cultural competency is the ability to understand and interact effectively with people from other cultures. As you can see from this definition, cultural competency is aligned with interaction, with effective interaction. But that doesn't recognize the imbalance of powers. It doesn't recognize the other side. And that is important to keep in mind, because we need to understand the other side. And that's why I include in this presentation knowledge of cultural humility. That definition said that a lifelong learning process which incorporates openness, power balancing, and critical self-reflection when interacting with people for mutual beneficial partnership and institutional change. As we can see here, the main points I underline, and it means that it is a lifelong learning. It recognizes power imbalance. Also, it includes critical self-reflection that we need, and that is mutually beneficial for partnerships and institutional change. I think that from the concept, we can get the main points. It's a lifelong learning. It's not something that we, like in the cultural competency, we get to the top and that's it, that's enough. No, we need to keep learning. As a sociologist, for us, the concept of community is very important. And one of the critical pieces that I always recommend is the piece of interaction. Beyond the individuals, beyond the geography that implies in the concept of community, the element of interaction is critical. Maximize the opportunities to interact and learn from each other. That is going to give you an important skill to extrapolate in many other different situations. I won't go with detail about cultural humility, even though I think it's an important approach to understand better. But I would like to emphasize what we would like to develop here: awareness, knowledge, attitude, skills, and actions. That is some of the competencies that we would like you to develop when you are encounter with multicultural population that you work with, or you are providing services. There are other recommended practices that has been used in general, like cultural brokers, like the promotoras, or mentorship, translation and interpretation services that are important, like what we are using now. And I appreciate that we are providing that services, because it expands to what we are sharing to other groups. Otherwise, they won't get access to. But we need to look in the context. We would like to look in a more holistic way. And Tim, because of the time, I don't know if at this point would be good to open for questions and answers, or do you think we can cover the next part that is related to those recommended practices?
Yeah, I think given that we have about 6 minutes left of our time, maybe we open it up to some questions if folks have them. And I will, Bill just asked if I can attach the slides. So I'm working on putting the slides into the chat box right now. And then folks can download the slides and look at the additional information.
Okay. So I'm going to stop here, and I think it is important to create this discussion time for questions and answers.
Are there any specific questions for Dr. Ortiz?
Well, maybe I could go with one. I was just wondering if Dr. Ortiz could expound a little bit on the relationship between cultural humility and the presence of, or self-acknowledgement of biases, of personal biases that each of us have.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I think the cultural humility is very important because it has this self-reflection piece, and that is gonna open about the biases that we do have. I think if we can open ourselves and reflect at any point, I think we are going to improve our interactions that we have with others, because the bias is always there, and sometimes without the willing to learn more, is gonna keep there. That's why I recommended to maximize the opportunities for interactions, because sometimes the training, those trainings that we have, it give us cognitively information, but it's difficult to extrapolate, to put in practice when we haven't had the opportunity to interact with these other groups, with the other people. That is going to, if we want to, and that is the other element of cultural humility, is the willingness to keep learning, because it's a lifelong learning. We will open, rather than closing our ideas, we are going to open to see different perspectives. And that's why I think that is an important point, especially for employers, because the different perspectives are gonna help to expand our thinking and how we approach the potential problems that we can face. So the cultural humility, and I like that relation that you make me to reflect on that. I think it's going to help us to open those biases that we do have, and it's going to be a great case to extrapolate to other situations, because what we learn from our interactions with others can be applied to many other different situations.
No, thank you. That's a great answer. It's exactly kind of what I was looking at, but more so, I really appreciate your optimistic viewpoint that I totally agree with.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Richard. Any other questions? Well, Dr. Ortiz, I want to thank you for your time today. What a great presentation. As you all have seen in the chat box, or maybe you haven't seen that we put this in the chat box, I put the CLAS standards, a link to the CLAS standards that we were referencing earlier in the presentation. I also put a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that you can click on and download to your desktop in the chat box. And right now I'm going to include a link to the Qualtrics evaluation for this presentation. If you could go ahead and click on that, and it'll take you 3 minutes to complete the Qualtrics evaluation. You'll also be receiving an email from Aubrey Snyder here shortly with your CRC verification form. So you'll get 1.5 hours for today's presentation. And there'll also be a link to the evaluation as well embedded in that email. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate you joining, spending your afternoon with us. And thank you, Dr. Ortiz. I appreciate your knowledge and experience in this field for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Just one final comment that I would like to say it. In the PowerPoint at the end, you have a list of resources that I recommend about this topic. The list of resources are related with AUCD, the American University for Center for Disabilities, that is a nationwide network with great information. Also, the NCC, the National Center for Cultural Competency at the University of Georgetown, and at the Office of Minority Health with information related with this topic. I think among other resources that will be helpful if you want to look forward and learn forward. Thank you and appreciate your attention.
Thanks again.